When firefighters found her, she was chained to a post inside a burning barn. Her owner had left her there to die. She was barely breathing, covered in burns, and so thin her bones showed through charred skin. No one thought she would survive the night. But 90 days later, what she became left everyone who saw her in tears. This is a story about survival, justice, and the moment a broken soul chose to protect what she couldn't protect in herself. Make sure you hit like and subscribe because this one will stay with you. Drop your country in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. The call came in at 2:30 in the morning. Structure fire. Old barn on the outskirts of town. Flames visible from the highway. Dave had been a firefighter for 12 years, long enough to know the sound of urgency in the dispatcher's voice, long enough to recognize when a call was going to be bad. He was suited up and on the truck within minutes, riding through the darkness toward the orange glow rising above the tree line. By the time they arrived, the barn was fully involved. Flames punched through the roof. Smoke billowed black and thick into the night sky. The heat was so intense they could feel it from 50 yards away. The property owner was nowhere to be found. Neighbors said he had left town 2 days earlier, just packed up and disappeared. Dave and his crew deployed hoses and fought the fire with everything they had. It took them 40 minutes to knock it down. By the time the flames were out and the smoke cleared enough to see inside, Dave already knew what they would find. Destruction, ash, loss. But then he heard it. A sound, faint and desperate, coming from the back corner of the barn where part of the structure had somehow held. Dave moved carefully through the wreckage, his boots crunching on charred wood, his flashlight cutting through the haze. And there, in the corner, chained to a metal post, was a horse. Mare, barely alive. She was lying on her side, her body so thin that every rib was visible. Her coat was burned in patches, the skin beneath raw and blistered. Her breathing was shallow and labored. And around her neck was a heavy chain, padlocked to the post, short enough that she couldn't have escaped even if she'd had the strength to try. Someone had left her here, chained, unable to run when the fire started, left to burn. Dave visited every day. He sat beside her. He talked to her in the same steady voice he had used in the barn. He told her she was safe. He told her the worst was over. He told her to keep fighting. The days bled into weeks, and slowly, impossibly, things began to change. By day 30, Ember was standing more often. The burns were healing, though the scars they left behind were deep and permanent. Her coat was patchy where it had burned away completely, but she was eating small amounts on her own. She was drinking. She was surviving. Dave brought her apples. He brushed the parts of her coat that weren't too damaged to touch. He watched her take 3 steps across her stall without help, and it felt like a victory worth celebrating. But he also wondered if she would ever be more than this, if the trauma and the pain had broken something inside her that couldn't be fixed. Quick question. If you knew an animal would never fully recover, would you still fight for them? Let me know in the comments. Now back to the story. By day 60, Ember was moving freely around her recovery paddock. Her weight was returning. The burns had scarred over, leaving patterns of pink and white across her dark coat. She would never look the way she had before the fire, but she was strong. She was healthy. And for the first time since David found her, she walked up to him voluntarily and rested her head against his chest. Dave stood there with his hand on her neck and felt something shift. She was trusting again, slowly, carefully, but trusting. The county had arrested the property owner, charged him with animal cruelty and arson. He would face trial. He would face consequences. And Ember would never see him again. Justice was moving. But for Dave, the real victory was standing in front of him. Day 90 arrived quietly. Ember was unrecognizable from the skeletal, burned creature Dave had found chained in that barn. Her coat had grown back in most places. Her scars remained, visible reminders of what she had survived, but they no longer defined her. She was strong, confident, whole. David planned to find her a permanent home, somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, somewhere she could live out the rest of her life in peace. But then the call came. Another barn fire. 2 counties over. Another horse found inside. This one a foal, maybe 6 months old. Burned. Abandoned. Barely alive. The vet called Dave directly. He said the foal's injuries were severe, that the recovery would be long and painful, that they needed someone who understood what it took to save an animal that had been left to die. Dave didn't hesitate. He said yes. They brought the foal to the facility where Ember was recovering. The small, trembling creature was placed in a stall near Ember's paddock, burns bandaged, eyes wide with fear and pain. Dave stood outside the stall, watching the foal struggle to stand, and his heart broke all over again. Then he heard movement behind him. Ember had walked to the fence separating her paddock from a barn. She was looking at the foal. Her ears were forward. Her body was tense, but not with fear, with recognition. Dave opened the gate between them slowly. He didn't know what would happen. Didn't know if Ember would be afraid or indifferent or aggressive. But Ember walked straight to the foal's stall. She lowered her head. She touched her scarred muzzle gently to the foal's burned coat. And then she stood there, solid, steady, guarding. The foal, who had been trembling and alone, stopped shaking. It leaned into Ember's warmth. And for the first time since arriving, it closed its eyes. Dave stood in the barn doorway and felt tears streak down his face. Ember knew. She knew what it felt like to burn. She knew what it felt like to be abandoned. She knew what it felt like to believe no one was coming. And she wasn't going to let this baby face that darkness alone. Over the following weeks, Ember became the foal's protector. She stood beside it during treatments. She nuzzled it when it cried. She refused to leave its side, even when her own paddock was open. The vet said he had never seen anything like it. A horse choosing to mother an injured foal that wasn't hers. Choosing to relive her own trauma by staying close to another creature going through the same pain. But Dave understood. Ember wasn't reliving trauma. She was rewriting it. She couldn't save herself that night in the barn, but she could save this foal. And in doing so, she was healing something deeper than burns. 3 months later, both Ember and the foal were thriving. The foal's burns had healed. Its strength had returned, and it followed Ember everywhere, trusting her completely. Dave made the decision to keep them together. He found a small property with enough land for both of them, a place where they could run and graze and heal in the sun. On the day he brought them home, he stood at the fence and watched Ember and the foal move through the pasture side by side. 2 survivors, 2 souls marked by fire, 2 lives that shouldn't have made it but refused to give up. The property owner who had chained Ember and left her to die was convicted. He served time. He paid fines. He was banned from owning animals ever again. But for Dave, the real justice wasn't in a courtroom. It was standing in that pasture. It was watching Ember choose to protect instead of retreat. It was seeing the foal grow strong under her care. It was knowing that even the most broken things could still choose to love. Dave didn't know if Ember would survive when he found her chained in that burning barn. He just knew he couldn't walk away. And 90 days later, she proved that survival isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning, because the soul strong enough to heal can become strong enough to protect. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Hit subscribe so you never miss stories like this one.